So we're back to Compact Conversations. I'm Stephen Adubato here with Mayor Ras Baraka of Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Baraka, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So a few months ago, I wrote a piece in Compact about policing reform in Newark. You made a lot of headlines for the improvements you made in the city, really dropping the crime numbers, but also building a sense of trust in the city, a sense of safety that a lot of citizens really needed. And it was interesting because a lot of people who read this article were surprised to see an urban progressive politician really putting into effect policies with policing that made a huge difference, because we see plenty of headlines about urban politicians who have lax policies, soft attitudes towards crime, which end up not benefiting the citizens, not benefiting anyone. So I'm curious for you, how is your brand of progressivism different from other urban politicians? What do you think is distinct about your approach?
I don't know if there's a brand to progressivism. I don't know about that. I just am trying to solve problems that people have in our community every day. I mean, our job is to figure out how to move heavy objects, and that's what we do. With as much help and support as we can get from anybody who wants to help and support us to move these objects down the road. So I would say that that's it. Like, ultimately, we're just trying to reduce people's burden every day.
And one of the key things that I tried to emphasize in this article is that you were very keen on bringing many people to the table to try to figure out how to improve the situation. And it's something that I think a lot of, especially urban politicians, can learn from. But it's not something that's very common. I haven't seen many other examples of this happening. So I'm wondering, why is it that other cities, other politicians may struggle to pull off that approach of bringing people to the table? What are some obstacles that might be in the way for that to happen?
The ideological obstacles that people allow to get in the way.
Sure.
That's number one. I mean, people may not believe exactly the same things, and it usually gets in the way of us solving problems, which is an issue, and we have to work our way around that and navigate that. Other things, maybe people are insular, right? They believe that they can solve the problems themselves and they don't need anybody else. Collaboration is a skill,
Yes.
right? It's not taught in school. You don't learn this in college. There's no degree in collaboration. You have to, first of all, you have to want to do it. The will has to be there, and then you basically learn as you go how to collaborate. It probably should be a skill that's taught, but ultimately it's important, and you begin to see that everybody doesn't have it. It sounds simple, but it isn't. Like, I hate to talk about it because it's almost like I'm simplifying these complex problems that people have. But ultimately, a lot of people cooperate, but they don't collaborate.
Interesting. What's the distinction? What would you say?
Well, cooperation is people not giving you a hard time, not purposefully getting in your way. That's you being cooperative. Me, I call you, you'd be like, can I get your help with this? And you may help me with something or allow me to do something. That's cooperation. Collaboration is using our skills and resources together from the beginning to the end of the project, right? So we've decided collectively to use what we have to move this ball down the field. That's collaboration, right? A quarterback has to collaborate with a wide receiver. It's not cooperation, right? I'll catch the ball, okay, throw it.
Yeah.
They actually have to make a strategy.
And as you said, it takes skill, but it also takes the will to even want to try to make it happen. So for you, what's behind this? What really motivated you to put in that work to, again, not take the easy way of, this kind of soft cooperation, but we really want to get our hands dirty and collaborate, do the hard work?
Because we couldn't move it without it.
Yeah.
It's too big for one person or one group or one institution. Even when you're lifting weights in the gym, you need a spotter.
Yeah.
So it's if you want to do something small, then you can do it alone. You don't need anybody. The bigger the thing you want to do, the more hands you're going to need on deck. So it's important to understand that the things that we're trying to do are heavy things, big obstacles that we need multiple hands in and on. And so, if we're saying we want to reduce violence and crime in a consistent way, and not just year over year, up and down, up and down, up and down, you want to have a real impact on what's happening, then you're going to need further collaboration, right? If you want to do this and at the same time improve the relationship between the police and the community, then, well, you need to go a little further, right? Because now the plane is getting heavier, right? So the bigger it is, the more people you need.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's the skill, it's the will to do it, but it's also you need to know what are the different factors involved? Who are the people that I need to be talking to? Who should I be bringing to the table? And something that I tried to say in the article is that you're from this city, you've lived in this city, your heart is in the city. You know what's going on here. You know who you need to talk to.
Right.
I'd imagine that's really hard for a politician who is not from their city and don't really know it.
That's very true. It is true. Now, that if you're not from the area, if you're not have boots on the ground and understand the complexities of the community, it becomes harder to do these things. So it's important to compensate for that, to get people around you who are, to make your make it your business to get in the community and build relationships, because relationships is like 75% of the way, right? And if you don't build these relationships, it's going to be difficult to get collaboration, because people have to want to collaborate with you, and so relationship is important. People usually look at the outcome and they figure, oh, my tone is not important, relationship is not important, all these other kind of positive energy is not important, but that's not true. All those things are important, right? And people have to see your compassion and passion for these things to make them feel like, okay, I want to be involved in this. They have to see a vision and you wanting to win, for them to decide, let's put our resources in with this. It's an investment that you're asking people to make. You're asking them to make a serious, concrete investment on a strategy that you didn't just come up with it yourself. So you have to have the ability to be vulnerable, to say, listen, we'll add other people's ideas and strategies onto this in order to make this work. And if you don't do that, then you might get half-hearted folks involved, and you can't. There's collaboration and half-hearted response is not the same thing. So you can't get that to happen. So.
And I opened this article highlighting the summer of 2020, the protests in the city, over the murder of George Floyd. We all remember that summer. And plenty of people had their fears about what was going to go down in Newark then. People were thinking back to 1967. And they were shocked by what turned out in the end. It made it into the New York Times. People were amazed. And I tried to highlight that this wasn't just spontaneous. It was a lot of work. It was, as you said, like trying to figure out who are the key players, who do we need to get to collaborate to make this happen, not just for the sake of avoiding violence, but really honoring who this protest was in the name of, really bringing attention to the real issue. What did it take to pull that off? What did you actually have to do to make that happen?
Relationships, and then to, again, make yourself vulnerable to see this is a moment, like people are feeling something that's very real, cogent, that's serious, that's, you have to get out there and admit first that something happened. Yeah. And that's what we did. We had a press conference with the organizers of the protest. I went to the protest. I spoke there. I marched with the folks there. We had a lot of community groups that worked with us all the time, that were involved in the protest, in the crowd, talking to people, making sure the temperatures were low. Yeah. We allowed people to express what they wanted to express as loudly and vociferously as they wanted to do that. Yep. And I would tell you 99% of the people are interested in being lawful. They want to protest in a way because they know that they're smart enough to know that anything else will overshadow the actual protest. And to talk about that and us saying that out loud, making people understand that that's the reality of it. But more importantly, the police collaborated with this, right? They also made sure that their presence was minimal, right? That that they were out there but not out there, right? That they weren't provocative, like they didn't come out with flapjacks and hard hats and big, shields. They weren't standing around looking menacing to agitate or provoke people or trigger people's trauma. And people don't even look at it that way. People are feeling this is a traumatic incident for a lot of people. And them out there doing that triggers them. And so we consciously and deliberately tone that all the way down. Right.
The focus on de-escalation.
Right.
Usually gets overlooked in these kinds of situations. But also the need to build this trust amongst all the parties involved to really, like when you're saying that you had this press conference, you let people voice what they had to say. It shows that like you want to earn the respect of the people that you're serving as a politician.
Right.
I think most people in politics, if they're not entering into it with that mentality, it's going to be hard to pull off something like that, obviously. Right?
Yeah, and politically, people want to say everybody is not always right. You're not right 100% of the time.
No.
It's just not possible to be right all of the time, right?
Yeah.
This kind of narcissism that makes people believe that they're always right. So it's okay to say the police made a mistake, that they did something wrong, that this shouldn't have happened, right? That we don't believe in this. No one should die this way. It's all right to say that. You can say that and support police at the same time. This idea that we have in this country that is being fomented by the environment we live in now, that forces people to choose one or the other. Like you can reduce violence and crime and at the same time do it in a way that's constitutional and not violate people's rights. Like it's possible to do that.
It takes more work.
Right, it takes more work. Yeah. It's possible to say this shouldn't happen. Like the police should not do this, and support the police at the same time. That's not because I said that does not make me not want to have police in my community.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into this point because, as you're saying, like you don't want the police there to antagonize the protesters because that's not going to help anyone. But also, you did say during that era that these pushes to kind of just get rid of the police completely is this. I mean, in your words, you said it's this liberal bourgeois kind of fantasy in a way,
right?
Which again, it's how is this going to serve? First of all, is it realistic? Second of all, would it really serve the people? This antagonistic mentality, you have to pick one side or the other. Again, it may make you feel very self-righteous because you have this agenda, this mission, but doesn't really take into account, how's that going to impact the people on
There's
the
no pragmatism related to that at all.
Yeah.
And these people don't live in these communities. When I go to community meetings, people's grandmothers ask for police. Yeah. They want to know where the police are. I couldn't sell that to anybody in my neighborhood where I was born and raised. Yeah. I couldn't sell that to people. Oh, we're going to get rid of the police. They would think I was crazy, right? And so why would you bring that here in a place where you have 112, 113 homicides in 1 year, like or rape or aggravated assaults? Why would you say that to people who just lost kids who were shot in the playground, right? Not just by police, but by violence, right? Who are experiencing these situations and not have a real answer. Because most of the stuff that people are talking about are talking points, are like emotional things that they're putting out there. These are answers. And a lot of times they don't have the answer, right? And so they appeal to people's emotions and get us all fired up.
I think because they're afraid, like you said, to admit, at the same time, people may be afraid to admit we made a mistake. I think a lot of people are afraid to admit we don't have the answers.
That's
We're going to jump to this very emotional kind of thing.
That's right. Absolutely. It takes more. It's a different kind of capacity that you have to have. So knocking things down and building things up is two different skill sets, right? And so I can easily say this needs to go. I call the demolition guys out to knock the building down, but I don't call them to build it, right? Yeah. You have to call some other people to build the building. So it takes a whole nother skill set for folks who want to build what we need to see, and a lot more patience. By the way, right? Because I could throw a bulldozer into a building and knock it down in a couple of days, but it's going to take me 18 months to erect one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, I mean, if you don't live in the area where you're doing advocacy, it's hard to really measure what is the impact going to be of this, whatever it is I'm advocating for.
For sure.
But what you said, that you understand that it requires this level of pragmatism. I find that that's a rarity a lot of the times within politics. What's behind that for you? Like, what
My
kind of
mom,
brought you to what is it?
my mom,
Your mom. Okay.
she said, your father was an ideologue. He was a
Yeah.
historian, a writer, a philosopher. The difference between you and him, when he went to the supermarket, nobody asked him for a job,
Mm.
right? And so, for me, that means people want you to do something.
Yeah.
That's what they want. That you can't have a debate with them. You can't talk ideology to them in aisle 3 in the produce section. They want you to do something about their condition. And it don't even matter who was in charge before, 2 days before you got there, you there now, right? So what are you going to provide or present? And so I believe my job is to solve problems, ultimately. And there's some ideology, obviously, that I have that I lean on, but ultimately it's about getting these problems solved, moving the ball down the field so somebody else can score if I can.
So if mom taught you pragmatism, dad more of an idealist, what did you learn from him though? Like what can you say you've
Absolutely.
implemented into your way of leading?
Research, study, reading, no investigation, no right to speak.
Mm.
The desire to know the information, to have the information, to be prepared. And ultimately, I got that from him through watching more than like him saying it, just through watching him study and read all night, in the morning, in the bathroom, in the kitchen,
Wow.
everywhere, just all the time. And so you begin to have a love for information and reading and research. So that's in writing, which is, what I was consumed by as a young man growing up. So ultimately, I got that from the love of poetry and art, music. Yeah, definitely.
What would you say has been most influential, whether it's literature, poetry?
Right.
What have you always turned back to in your own life?
In terms of art,
Art, literature, any of these things that you're saying.
yeah. I mean, first of all, I always have to be prepared. Like I feel like sometimes over prepared. Like, and sometimes when I'm at events and I see people and they say stuff and I'm like, well, this person is not prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost irritating that you could go and read this stuff. You
Yeah.
could have did it 5 minutes before you got out of the car.
Yeah.
But and sometimes I feel like I'm cheating, right? So I'll get on my phone and look something up and reading it, and then I gotta remember that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like there's nothing wrong with me doubling back, making sure I got my facts correct, my information right, that I know what I'm talking about before I get before people. And so I do lean on that, and I lean on my poetry for sanity, for writing and music, right? So the love of art is still there. It's probably why we invest heavily in art in the city of Newark. Because I was taught that not only art has a wider kind of political and social kind of view and responsibility, but it's also an economic engine. It's an opportunity to develop cities and move people towards places, right? And my father used to say, people don't go to New York just to go see the city. They go there because of the art, because of theaters, because of plays, because of what they present there, jazz shows, food, everything. And so we've been trying our best to, emulate that here in this space, a place where people want to come and hang out and enjoy themselves at the same time.
And I'm also wondering, in addition to like the way your parents influence you, things that you've read, the arts, you have experience in education in the city as well.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how your experience in the schools have kind of shaped the way you take on this role within the city.
Listen, I think I learned how to govern being a principal.
Okay.
Right? I would, being a principal at Central High School and being a vice principal, but ultimately being a principal taught me how to, talk to people who might not agree with me, get parents together and teachers and students in the same kind of thing, use data to inform my work, right? To inspect what I expect. And these are things that I live by, that I say to my directors: inspect what you expect, right? And they look at that like it's some profound philosophy. This was like everyday practice. Like if we have a staff development meeting, I have to go around and do teacher observations
Yeah.
by the policy of the district to make sure that the people are doing what we say that they do, and move around and understand that my presence is important. My proximity to the problem is going to help move it forward, right? You always have to be aware of how close you are to the problem, right? Because the closer you are, I think the greater your opportunity to have to come up with solutions. And so proximity is important, right? To be in the cafeteria, because that's where it goes down, right? Be after school outside. Your relationships with people are important, and they go a long way. We used to call it putting money in the bank at high school, by supporting young people when they're not in trouble, helps you discipline them when they are, right? And so it's the same thing, the same kind of, tactics.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you were saying before, though, about policing in the city, that you want to earn the respect of the citizens. You want the police to earn the respect, so that when, obviously sometimes there will be a time when the police need to get into action, and you hope that the people will respect that they're doing what they have to do out of the best interest for them.
That's right.
But if you don't forge that respect, then of course people are going to leave.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. But so starting from looking at your experience in education, how it shaped your position in the city, leading the city. Now we're moving on to the gubernatorial race coming up next year. And your platform is it's a remarkably progressive one, especially when it comes to taxing reform, to housing policy. And in New Jersey, which is, a fairly blue state, but still you're definitely setting yourself apart from the mainstream. So why take that risk? Why is that worth it for you to run on this platform?
If I don't do it, I don't need to run at all. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have to run for governor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I could be the mayor, and finish my career here, go into the private sector or go home and write, but one day I will do that. But if we're going to take this big thing on, then we need to push as far as we can. And as my mother would say, get the things done that need to get done. It's to me, it's useless to take on something like this in that kind of space with one of the most powerful positions in the country. New Jersey governors have one of the most powerful positions, and have the ability to do things you can do and not go as far as you can go. And I think the problem with New Jersey is that we tiptoe. We walk all the way up to the door of democracy. We just don't open it. And I think that it's time for us to go inside. The time period calls for it. You got Kamala Harris on a national level talking about opportunity economy, talking about building more affordable housing. In New Jersey, we fighting affordable housing. In this blue state, Kamala Harris says she wants to build 4 million units. We fighting against 80,000, right? So, I mean, it's time to push it in that direction. Most of the problems that people complain about, they complain about the problem but don't want to do what's necessary to fix them. And there is the issue that we have, even what we're talking about in Newark, right? So people are good at telling you what's wrong.
Yeah.
And lamenting about it very loudly and going off. But when you start saying, this is what we need to do to fix it, then people get timid, right? And so it's not a time for being timid, right? We have to go forward.
Tell me a little bit more about what you think has to be done in Jersey to respond to the housing crisis. What are the details that you see need to be taken care of?
Well, ultimately, I think the law that Senator Singleton passed is the right thing. The problem is that laws are laws. Somebody has to execute it, right? Which is why 40 years ago they had the same thing, and it never happened. Yeah. They had COA. They were paying people to build housing that never got built. We don't know where it is. We don't know where the money is. And so 40 years later, they pass another law, and now you have 22, 23 municipalities suing and have an opportunity. Really, what will happen is we'll be tied up in court unless the judge just says this is ridiculous. We're not doing it. So somebody has to execute this thing, right? And I'm glad to see the DCA said that they need housing navigators. Yeah. But ultimately, what needs to happen is they have to go to these municipalities, sit down with mayors, local housing advocates, the building trades, all these folks, and come together and talk about what a strategy is to build housing in the next 2 or 3 years. This is at crisis proportion now. So you have to deal with it like a crisis. You have to sit with the building trades and say, listen, we need you to reduce what the cost is on building, and what you lose in the negotiation on the cost, you make up for in the amount of housing we're going to build in the next 2 or 3 years, right? So if we build 80,000 units, obviously you're going to benefit from the 80,000 units, as opposed to the 3,000 that the state builds annually now, which is pittance, right? So if we go from 3,000 to 80,000, there's a lot more folks you can hire and a lot more money to be made. Then you have to identify where we're going to do this at. And I would identify places around transit first, right? Because ultimately we know that 50% of the people in the city don't own a car, they don't drive. So you have to understand that to know that we have to build it around transit, or you're going to put people in another problem, right? Plus it's the smart thing to do anyway. And it also gives us the excuse and reasoning later on to expand transit. Right, so that's what we need to be doing, and begin to identify those places in the cities that have that, and in a lot of these communities and the land around it, and start there. Then we could use these tax credits. They got like $1 billion worth of tax credits that we use to build luxury apartments all over the state of New Jersey. I wouldn't say all over, because everybody can't build a 30, 40-story unit building in their suburban community, right? So Newark, Jersey City, Hoboken, maybe Camden, places like that are benefiting from this. You have to take some of that money, a lot of those tax credits, and set it aside. And I would build first loss kind of fund and put that stuff out there and allow the philanthropic community and the private community to invest 2 to 1, 3 to 1, to create a fund so we can have immediate money to invest in the economy right away to build all of these units that we want to build. We identify how many we can build and move forward and actually start building these units, as opposed to passing a law and then wait and then kind of socializing it with these people and going back and forth, because nobody talked to them in the beginning. And now they're angry that they're going to court. Well, that's a knee-jerk reaction. Of course they're going to go to court, because some of these people have never built housing ever. And their idea of what affordable housing is wrought with, prejudices and error and foolishness and all kinds of, things that are just wrong. They don't have the right information. And I think we need to go and sit down with these folks and figure out how to get this thing done.
So it sounds like you're saying you want to use this approach that you've used here in the city, of bringing all these different people to the table at the state level. You think that's possible on the larger scale?
100%. 100%.
It's a matter of the will.
That's it. Yeah. It's like the lead service line thing. We had to have the state DCA, the local finance board, the municipal council, the county government. Like, we had to have all these people involved in order to make this thing work. The Port Authority. So we had to bring sometimes you meet with people separately, and then you bring them all together. You meet with 3s and 4s and 5s. There's ways to do it, knowing what people's personalities are. These two people may have a problem, so I'm going to have to meet with you, and then meet with you, and then meet with us. But, you have to want to do that work, because the problem is important enough to solve. And it doesn't take as long as people think. In fact, it takes longer to sit there and go back and forth and not come up with a strategy.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what you've already done in Newark in terms of housing and zoning. Because as you said, we have these new luxury high-rises in the city. We have different businesses, corporations, in addition to, small locally owned businesses. And the thing is, you've expressed several times that you, as a pragmatist, you want to have a realistic approach. You need rateable real estate. You need to be bringing money into the city. You don't want to destroy the local culture. You don't want people to be priced out of their where they're living. You don't want to destroy local businesses. Again, a lot of people want it to be this either or. Either we totally gentrify or we do nothing at all. How do you maintain that balance? How do you?
It's very hard, brother. It's a tightrope. But you're right. In a city where only 25% of the people own their home, right? So at the end of the day, you need ratables, or you can't even run the city. You need corporations, you need big buildings, you need these things. And you need to expand home ownership so more people can pay taxes. So we have to do all of those things. So we that's why inclusionary zoning and things like that are important to us, to move from exclusionary to inclusionary, because we need to say you have to build some level of affordability for working people that live here, for folks that are trying to do the things that they need to do and live here at the same time. You have to do that. And we have to deliberately invest in affordability outside of what's being built. So we have to use the wealth that's coming to our city to invest in our city, right? And that's an active and difficult process because the developer, there's different interests that you're navigating. The developers have an interest and the community has a different interest, and you're trying to navigate those interests. And then in the middle of that, you have people who are not low income and can't afford market rate. So you have to build housing for a workforce as well at the same time. So we really have to come up with all kinds of diverse solutions to housing in the city of Newark, because we have diverse groups of people who live in our community now, right? And so that's difficult because it becomes increasingly difficult because the market is not conducive to that right now. We are absent supply all across this region, which means that the prices are high. So to keep them steady and drive them down is an everyday effort and push at the same time, which is why we need the state to step in and build more housing to help that market, make it easier for us and local communities to help drive prices or keep prices down the way we want them to. So we have to be as creative as possible, using Section 8 vouchers to turn them into ownership, partnering with the Urban League and community-based organizations to build affordable housing and affordable home ownership, giving city property the first right of refusal to local nonprofit developers, right? So to combat the LLCs and all this other stuff. I mean, and that's only so much you can do on our level, because the state has to step in and regulate LLCs and tell them they can't buy 50 properties at a time, right? You just can't buy 50 properties at a time. We have put a policy in place locally with our property that we own that you can't buy 50 properties at a time, no matter who you are, right? But I don't control the private market, right? I don't control you selling your home or somebody's foreclosed home on a foreclosed list on the sheriff's list. They can buy as many of those as they can afford off the sheriff's list. You know, somebody has to step in and say you can't do that anymore. You have to slow that down because you're artificially driving the prices up in the market.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, the common thread through all of this is to be able to pull things like this off, not going to extremes, bringing all these different people to the table. You have to have the skill, you have to actually know how to do it. You have to have the will, the passion, but also you need to actually know the people. And again, if you don't take especially if you're not from whatever area you're leading, you have to really take the time. And it's not easy.
No.
But this seems to be the most the most pragmatic thing to do.
Yeah. A lot of people want the title, they just don't want the job.
Yeah. That's the case for most people, I would say. But so I think just to close, something that I think gets overlooked that more attention needs to be paid to is that, as you said, I mean, a significant portion of residents in the city don't own land, don't own the places that they're living in. And you said several times that this is a matter of racial justice.
That's right.
That the majority of the city is African American, but most majority don't own the property they're living in. It's people not living in the city, people of different backgrounds owning the property. I wonder if you have anything to say about, we've seen in the last couple of years plenty of new iterations of racial justice movements. I wonder sometimes though if they're the focus on, I guess we could say, symbolic issues, whether it's representation, the language we use, obscures more concrete matters like this. Well, what do you think? What do you see going on in that realm?
I think those things are easier. It's like people say, "Oh, I have a diverse cabinet," right? And it just using this like making a synonym. At the end of the day, the people on the front is easy for me to do. Like I can easily make a diverse group of directors, but inside the building, when you go down into the meat of it, if it's not diverse there, that's where it really matters. Because these are the people that are doing the work and creating the policy and meeting people and talking to folks. So it doesn't matter if I have a Latino police director with no Latinos on the police department.
Sure.
Right? Because the director is not out dealing with people. You need people in the department to deal with people, right? And I would say the same thing about these issues. Like, it's easy for us to talk about the face value top issues because they're easy to address, right? These are, I can say, oh, I'm going to give a $50,000 fund because George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do with it, and am I actually going to do something? Am I going to pass that money out? Am I going to do something with that? Is a whole nother thing, right? So we could say we want equity, but we don't want to build affordable housing, right? We could say we want equity, but we don't want to desegregate the schools, right? We want equity. We just don't want people living in my neighborhood, right? You'd be surprised, even in Newark, the kind of complaints I get from people who say crazy things like, oh, this happened because all these migrants live here. Like, these are people who've been discriminated against themselves, right? This kind of xenophobia that's created. Like, it's easy for us to talk big, grand ideas. But when you get into the meat of it, like, you got to do the work to build what you want to see. That's a difficult thing, right? If I'm at a community meeting and I say, we're going to come to talk about all of our problems, it'll be jam-packed. And I say, tomorrow we're going to meet at 8:30 a.m. But everybody who wants to talk about how to solve these problems, then it gets smaller. And then I say the next day at 8:30 a.m. we're going to meet and we're going to assign people roles and responsibilities to do the work. That number gets even smaller, right? And it'll keep going down and down and down and down when you get to the amount of work that needs to get done to solve these problems. And that's really what it is. The stuff that we're talking about doing is heavy work. It's not simple. That's why I hate simplifying it. Yeah. When I start talking about collaboration, I hate simplifying it because it's hard, heavy work. And anybody who thinks they can do it by themselves is fooling themselves or don't intend on fixing it anyway. Right? They just don't intend on doing it. They just want you to believe they are, right? They want you to believe that that's what they're going to do. But we actually trying to fix it. Like, I'm actually trying to fix some of these problems that I marched about, protested about, complained about, yelled and screamed about, because I don't want to just be known as somebody who yelled against the problems or had the right progressive line. Or said the things that were correct politically and emotionally. I want to be a part of the group of people that help fix it.
Exactly. So before we close, let's say if there are any urban politicians listening to us right now, and they hear what you're saying about needing to bring people to the table, needing to collaborate, needing to be pragmatic, they don't know where to start. What would you have to say to them? Or how do they get started?
Well, I would say you start with the people around you. Right? That you have to build solid relationships with the folks around you, with the folks that are in your circle and outside your circle and the community organizations that are there on your block, all of these things. If you don't even have relationships, we live on blocks, we don't even know the people next door to us. Like, build relationships with the people in your community and outwardly, I think you start there. Or if you're in an organization, you begin to build relationships specifically with people who you need to help you solve these problems, that you have solid relationships with them. And people think building relationships means that we agree on everything. And that's a mistake. That's just not true. I don't know anybody I agree with everything on. Like, at the end of the day, my mama don't agree with everything, but I love her and I'm going to Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, there's nobody you're going to agree with 100% on. You just have to have enough love for the solving the problem that those differences you have become de minimis in me building our relationship, together. And we have to learn how to unify and struggle at the same time. And that's really, really, what it is. I don't agree with everything that the corporate community does in the city of Newark, but I meet with them regularly and we solve problems all the time.
You have to.
I have to.
You have to do it.
Right? I have to. It just makes no sense for me not to. I can argue with Prudential until I'm blue in the face about all kind of philosophical and political issues, things that they're doing. But ultimately, They're helping us on homelessness. They helped us around our budget and financing. They help us with development, because we sit down and hammer these things out. That's it. You don't have to love everything everybody does. You just have to build a relationship where they're comfortable with you criticizing them, because it's different when you criticize people out of love as opposed to hate.
Absolutely. So I think that, again, especially for people in politics listening, but anybody listening from whatever political kind of perspective, background they may have, I think there's a very useful lesson to learn here about, again, really being realistic, really being pragmatic, and looking at what has to be done, even if that means going outside of our comfort zone, having to work with people we may not like, we may not agree with. At the end of the day, what matters most? That I defend my party line, or that we actually do something that serves the people.
100%.
So Baraka, thank you so much for coming on Compact Conversations.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.